We're live.
Salam everybody, we're going to be beginning in just a minute.
What Jeep do you have now?
Wrangler. Should be getting another one soon, hopefully.
That's a lot.
In the summertime.
Alright, perfect. Alright, Salam MEA community, thank you for tuning in today. I know there was some inclement weather here in New York, but thankfully we all came together for this great event. This event is catered towards real estate and investing. Really, trying to see exactly the in and outs of real estate. For those of you trying to get a career in real estate, the myths, how to succeed. For those of you like me who's looking to buy their first home soon, what are the do's and don'ts. And overall, just a general opinion from some experts on the market and how to invest. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel from left to right. So we're going to start with Ish.
Left to right?
Oh, well, sorry, yeah, right to left.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Ismail Kolia. I'm an account executive with Guidance Residential, originally from India. Alhamdulillah, I've settled in the Bronx of New York for the last 25 years. And I know a thing or two about real estate, and now I'm diving into mortgages.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Hamza Khamisa. I am a real estate salesperson at Fave Realty, soon to be associate broker. I am a student at Queens College. I've been doing real estate for almost 5 years now, and that's what I've been doing.
Hello everyone, my name is Sardar Asadullah. I am a real estate attorney. I have a practice that services the tri-state area, Long Island, and the 5 boroughs, and the majority of our practice, as I said, is real estate. So that's sort of what we'd like to focus on, and that's our expertise.
Perfect, perfect. So to kick it off, we have some pre-selected questions and topics to go over. One of the first topics that we want to answer is basically, what does a career in real estate look like? How does one get into real estate? What are some myths and misconceptions? And overall, how can one succeed and make a career in real estate? So just take it away.
I'll let the senior guy take over.
All right, so I started real estate right out of high school. So I was 18, I just graduated, and my test was exactly on the same day as my graduation. So I've been doing real estate for 5 years almost. I think the biggest myth I want to clear right away is that people think it's easy and it's quick money. It's definitely not. The first 2 years I struggled a lot. I had almost, I think, 1 deal in 2 years. But it all comes down to how much time you put in, how much effort you put in, how many people you know, and obviously the type of service you provide.
Yeah, I will tag along with Hamza. It is not easy. It does require a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work, a lot of follow-up skills. The money is certainly there. Real estate is one of those fields where you have the potential to make more than $100,000 a year, $200,000, $300,000. The potential is there. There are very few fields where you can go to school only for 75 hours and spend $1,000 in investment and make $100,000, $200,000 a year and still be your own boss, right? I always say this, and so they probably will not like it. When we go to a closing, there are 3 lawyers at the closing. They went to law school and probably got a lot of student loans. They charge around $1,500, $2,000, and the real estate agent will walk away from $5 grand to $15 grand to $20 grand. So the money's certainly there, but it does come with work. It does come with stellar follow-up skills and interpersonal skills. You got to be able to put yourself out there and introduce yourself and say hello to people. Yeah.
Okay, great. What do you think are some misconceptions that people have when they first try to get into real estate or are thinking about a career in real estate?
I think what Hamza touched base on, which is it's easy. You see just about everybody trying to do real estate, right? A guy drives an Uber on the side and then he does real estate. Guy goes to school and he does real estate, and you name everything in between. So people have this misconception that it's easy. Anything else you want to add, Hamza?
But yeah, that's about it. I think most of the people that even get their license, for the most part, they're inactive and they're not really practicing their field. Another misconception that people have is that, I know so many people, as soon as I get my real estate license, everyone's going to be coming to me to get a house. That is a big misunderstanding. That does not happen. You'll get people here and there. It's obviously word of mouth. But you can't really depend on just the network you have. You got to always think about growing your network, which you're really good at.
I'll throw a few numbers out. 80% of deals in real estate are done by 20% of the agents. So it's a very handful few that are really killing it out there. The rest are just bouncing between walls to walls. And an average agent does about 4 deals in a year in America. So you've got to ask yourself before you enter into this field, hey, am I an average agent? Am I made to be an average agent, or am I extraordinary in terms? We all have something special. It's not that somebody has all the specialties. We all have something special. So you've got to find your niche and you've got to find what you're good at. But if this is your calling, absolutely, the money's there. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of that, how do you see that somebody is, entering into real estate? What's the ladder? Like, how do they get successful? What do they have to do in order to, get to a place where they're saying, they're making X amount and it's actually a career for them and not something they're doing on the side? What would you suggest?
I would say, like, the one mistake that I made was I didn't have the proper guidance. I didn't have the proper training. You got to find someone that you really vibe with, someone who's going to train you, mentor you, teach you the ropes, someone who might not be that selfish. So with me, I worked 2 years, and then my 3rd year, I found someone that was willing to train me. We spent countless hours. They would help me market, get the word out. We go to mosque, trying to get even though they're non-Muslim, they'll still come to the mosque with me to, teach people about real estate and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll tag along on that. Your environment really will dictate much of your success. Just like in business, in business, your first 10 employees will determine the success of your company. Similarly, in real estate, as an agent, the team or the company that you join will often determine how far you go. You may be somebody who's very motivated, very active, you've got a lot of energy, but if you're surrounded by people who are not going to nurture that energy and keep that fire going, it's going to burn out at some point. On the other hand, you might have an amazing company, but the agent is lackluster and doesn't have the fire. It's also not going to be a very successful relationship. When those two combine together, when you've got a really motivated and active person, and they're surrounded by an amazing company, that's where you're going to see results. My personal journey in real estate was, I actually got my license 5 years ago, and I joined this big brokerage in the Bronx, 100+ agents. I was going in every morning, a lot of scripting, a lot of role playing, a lot of learning in class, learning sort of going on, but I didn't really get the attention that I needed. I didn't get the one-on-one. I wasn't put in front of a computer and say, hey, here are leads, start making calls, and so forth. I had my own business keeping me busy, so I dropped out of real estate. A year and a half ago, I went and renewed my license, and I joined a different broker, 10 agents, and the energy level was completely different. So, for anybody who's interested in getting into real estate, you've got to pick your company very wisely. It's got to, my opinion is it should be a small company where you're going to get a lot of attention.
And I feel like real estate is one of those fields is that the amount of work you put in, you'll always get the results.
Absolutely, yeah. The more work you put in, the results you'll get. And in fact, we say in real estate, you'll see the results 3 months later. Yeah. So if you're going to office right now this week and making your calls, you'll be getting a check 3 months from now through a closing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just as an attorney from the outside looking in, clearly I agree. What you get in is, what you get out is what you will clearly put into the effort. And I've seen working in this, as you were saying a little earlier, there's a small number of agents that are doing really well. What I found is that they're customer service oriented. If you want to be successful in this industry, whether it's as a realtor or as an attorney, you have to provide top-notch customer service. That's, I think, the key at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's in any industry, and that's the one I try to abide by. Take care of your clients, everything else will fall into place, right? Don't chase the dollar, make your focus the customer, the client, their best interest, take care of them. The money will, money will follow. So absolutely, be a fanatic when it comes to customer service. Go above and beyond. Be reliable. I'm a stickler for being reliable. If I say I'm going to be there at 10 o'clock to show you a house, I'm there 9:50. I open all the doors. I turn on all the lights. When my clients come in, nobody wants to walk into a dark, dingy house. They want to walk into a bright, open house where it's going to feel safe and welcoming. So I try to get there 10 minutes before, open up all the doors, open up all the windows, the lights. So when they come in, it's like somebody's already living there. It's bright and open. So it's all about being customer focused.
Sounds good. So I think pivoting on that topic is people like myself or millennials that are looking to buy a home soon. What we want to know is like the process. So give us some like do's and don'ts on buying your first home.
I'll let you take the lead on everyone. You're my senior.
Okay.
And everything from it's everything from like mortgage to the lawyer aspect to getting the documents signed to getting the deed to getting the keys and even before to actually finding the home. So yeah.
Okay, so I mean, just like you would for anything else you shop for, obviously this is a bigger purchase. Shop around, look for the reliable agent, look for someone you feel comfortable with because you're buying a house. You don't buy a house every day. So find an agent that you feel that is trustworthy, wouldn't push you into a house that you don't really want. Just like you would look for a loan officer that's not pushy. Same thing with the attorney that you would trust, and that's why we have these two guys. So that's what I would say. Find a team that's trustworthy and reliable.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes a lot of home buyers make, and I've personally made that mistake in my own home buying journey, is they don't commit to an agent. I believe home buyers should commit to an agent. You don't go to a hairstylist or a barber, a different one every week. You shouldn't also go to a different agent every weekend for open houses. You should have one agent that you and your family are comfortable with. They've sat down with you. They've learned your wants and needs and your area and budget, and you should shop for houses through them. Right? The deals that I've closed, every one of those clients committed to working with me exclusively. And it paid off not only for me in terms of earning a commission, but it paid off for them in terms of getting to the house in a short amount of time. I'll give you my journey. When I was a home buyer 5 years ago, I must have seen 100 houses, and I'm not exaggerating. I must have seen 100 houses, and I saw them with perhaps 30, 40 agents. When I bought the house, I bought it through an entirely different agent, the listing agent. So all those 30, 40 agents lost out on working with me. But guess what? It wasn't my fault, right? I was the customer. I'm there to waste your time. They were the CEOs of their business, and none of them ever presented an agreement, say, hey, you'll have to work with me exclusively and we'll get the job done, right? So you want to find a focused realtor who knows what they're doing and then commit to them.
Just gonna pop in as an attorney. I think there are a lot of buyers who try to go at it without an agent, and I think that's a very big mistake. You should absolutely hire an agent. It makes it a lot easier when you're working with an agent that knows what they're doing. It also makes it easier on your attorney. There's a lot of issues that your attorney's going to iron out and deal with the agent that you may not be aware of or be involved with, and it's incredibly important to have the agent going in. And that to me is step one. So you should definitely have an agent.
Considering that they're free in New York State, a buyer's agent is completely free to the buyer.
I was just going to say, which other profession or which other industry do you have a licensed and experienced professional working on your behalf for the next 3, 4, 5 months completely free? I don't know of any other ones, right? So why wouldn't you have your own representation? The listing agent has one job, which is to get the house sold at the most money possible. Right? So you should never call the listing agent and say, hey, I want to buy this house. He's been hired or she's been hired by the seller, right? They're not your friend. They're not working on your behalf. You should get your own representation.
Got it. So in terms of, finding the home and then after, how does the process go, the negotiations? And that's something I guess you could chime in on.
There's a lot that happens actually before it even gets to the attorney. I think as far as negotiation goes, right? And you guys can speak to this, clients will find a house, they'll put in their offer, they'll complete an inspection, and even before I see a contract, there's a lot of back and forth. Definitely. If the agents are good at what they do, right, and this is I think where it's key, the agent can help you accomplish a lot before it even gets to my table, and that's where it makes it a lot easier on everybody. So one of those things is when you locate your house, you put your offer in, get your inspection done. Talk to your agent, be clear with your agent about the repairs and things that you're expecting to be done as you're making your offer. you can iron out a lot of those issues with your sellers. And I think that goes into the negotiation, because once the contracts come to my office or any attorney, and we start working on the nitty-gritty of the details of the contract, most of which will remain the same, because most contracts in New York they're boilerplate contracts. You know, we make changes here or there, but a lot of the negotiation happens before it even gets to our table. And just keep one thing in mind: once that contract is signed, there's no going back at that point, right? So it's really important that the things you want to address. Sometimes agents, even sometimes attorneys, will push you to sign contracts very quickly without addressing all of your needs, and that's the thing that you want to be careful about, because again, once the contract's signed, it's over. So if there's something that you wanted to address and you don't address it at the contract phase, and then you go to closing and that issue hasn't been addressed, and you try to talk to the seller about, hey, you know, something's not working here, this doesn't look right, the seller's attorney's going to turn around and tell your attorney it's not in the contract, and you're out of luck. And that's, you know, so it's really critical at that point that you let your team know, right, your realtor and your attorney, what your expectations are, so they can clearly negotiate on your behalf.
Yeah.
But I feel like the first step before you even start looking for a house, definitely get a pre-approval. That's a mistake that I feel like a lot of buyers make. They go out, start looking for a house, not really knowing what they can afford. You know, they just assume that, you know, say for example, you could do a $500,000 house. That's what I want to buy, not knowing that if I get pre-approved, I might be able to get something for 600, or not knowing that, you know, I can't go up to the 500, I can do 400. So that's definitely something that, you know, I recommend to all buyers. Get your pre-approval first. Know what your budget is, what you're working with, so that way you can narrow down what type of house you're looking for, what neighborhood you're looking for, and what's going to fit your needs.
Yeah, listen, any serious realtor, any realtor that knows what they're doing, they're not going to entertain you without a pre-approval. Any seller, whether they're represented by an agent or selling by themselves, they're not going to give you access without a pre-approval. So you're running into a lot of roadblocks because you're not pre-approved. Now let's imagine there are some sellers or agents who are willing to entertain you and show you a house without a pre-approval. Great, you go see a house, you fall in love with it. Now what? By the time you go and get your pre-approval in 3 days, somebody else already has made an offer and taken the house off market. You understand? So it doesn't really make sense to go out looking at houses without a pre-approval. It's really going to set the tone for your journey. What your budget is. It's going to give you what you can afford, and that way you avoid wasting time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for people, for example, that aren't pre-approved, what can they do to, you know, build up their credit or do something in order to get approved? And that definitely goes to people maybe, you know, that are younger, that are, you know, just out of school, you know, recently got married and are trying to buy their first home, and they're really worried about, is this bank going to approve me, or, you know, am I going to get pre-approved? So what are some steps that they can do to get?
I think the first thing they should do is talk to a mortgage company and try and get pre-approved, right? Because instead of assuming that they may not be approved, maybe they're too young or too fresh into the workforce, best thing to do is go ahead and try and get pre-approved, right? Talk to a mortgage officer and see if an approval is possible. If not, at least they'll give you a guideline of what's needed, and that'll create a roadmap for you to work on in the next 6 months, 12 months, and so forth. So I think that's a pretty good way to start, by talking to a mortgage officer. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's really good stuff. I think also, after they sign the contract and they go through the negotiations, what is the process then? Is there any other additional step that they would have to take, or anything that you recommend that they should take?
No, once you're at the contract phase, at that point that the contract is signed, usually for the buyer, your primary responsibility is to work with your mortgage loan officer to make sure you get your mortgage approval, because there are time frames in the contract that you have to adhere by, and one of those is what we call the mortgage contingency clause. So generally, most New York contracts will provide, you know, either between 30 or 45 days from the date the contract is signed to present the seller's side with a letter from the bank that says, yes, you know, our buyer here is approved and we are now moving towards closing. The loan is, they're going to get their mortgage, and now we track towards closing. And I always tell my clients that that is their biggest responsibility during this whole phase, is to be, you know, on the same page with the loan officer. And oftentimes it can be a very frustrating experience for buyers, because your bank will ask you 20 times for the same thing, and you'll provide it to them 20 times, and you'll get another 20 requests. And clients always vent that frustration, but that's the process, and it's not just one bank does it more than the other. Trust me, every single bank does it. So that's your biggest thing that you're gonna have to work towards. And then after that, your attorney is working on clearing issues related to title, and then you're working towards your closing date. And I think when you were talking to your real estate agent, and you're talking to when you're at the contract phase, is to be realistic with what you expect as far as closing goes. Because usually you have what's called an on or about date, which usually is 60 days from when the contract is signed, and that's how you should anticipate the process will take about that long. But once the contract is signed, at that point, it's you're working with your loan officer to get your mortgage approved, and hopefully you have an attorney that is reviewing your file, that has a team in place that's on top of your file. And the worst thing is when you get to a closing and the attorney no one's looked at the file, or there's things that pop up right at the table that could have been avoided if people were essentially doing their job.
One of the things I like to add is when you're, again, going back to the beginning, when you're looking for a realtor, when you're looking for the attorney, when you're looking for the inspector, rely on recommendations,
yeah.
Right? Whether they may be coming from your friends or family members or people in the community, rely on their recommendations, and then do due diligence, look them up online to see what the reviews are and the reputation is. But don't, pick one randomly. There's so many horror stories of horrible real estate agents and whatnot. So it's really important to make sure that you rely on recommendations. If you already have a realtor, if they're recommending you an attorney, take that seriously, or an inspector and so forth. The other thing a lot of home buyers are not aware of, and it delays their journey into home buying, is you've got to buy what you can afford today. Right, you've got to realize that your first house is not going to be a dream house. It's not going to, unless you've got $1 million, unless you've got a big budget, your first house is not going to be your dream house, right? So you've got to learn the art of sacrifice. You've got to see what's not so important, what's absolutely important, and you've got to pick and choose. If you wait to buy your dream house, your budget can't keep up, right? While your income is going up, while your credit is going up, and while your bank savings are going up, the market is going up faster. The prices and the interest is going up faster. So what you've got to do is you've got to buy what you can afford today, sell it 5 years from now, and then use that equity to trade up and buy something better. So that's something that a lot of first-time home buyers fail, because obviously they want that dream house, they want to be able to live comfortably, they want all those amenities that they've dreamed of, and then of course they want to have a good house for their friends and family to come home to as well, but realize that it's not possible, right? So rather than fight and keep waiting for it, go ahead and buy what you can afford today and then trade up.
Yeah, that's a very good perspective. In terms of mortgage, I know a question was in terms of like different financing options, and I know you're directly involved with the product, so do you want to speak further about that? Or
yeah, sure. So we're actually living through fortunate times, that for the last 16 years my company's been around Guidance Residential, providing Islamic mortgages. Before 16 years ago, people didn't have that option, and of course some ulama did give approval that because of the times, and because you have a need, you're okay with getting a mortgage. Fortunately, we don't even have to do that anymore, because we do have a pure halal program that exists. Guidance Residential, as we know, it's not a bank of any sort. It's not affiliated with a bank. We don't borrow money from anywhere. Privately funded by a wealthy family. And so instead of lending money and charging an interest, rather what we do is we do partnership with our clients. So they put some money, we put the rest, we buy the house together, we create a contract that they'll buy out our share over the next 15, 20, or 30 years. In the meantime, they're living in the house and they're paying us rent on that portion of the house. Right, so that turns the relationship, instead of a money lending relationship, it's a property relationship on an actual property. So we're fortunate enough to have that. We have actually financed 20,000 homes in the last 16 years. We just closed the year 2018 with 2,000 mortgages in the U.S., 400 of them in New York. So it's the #1 Islamic financing company in the U.S. and rapidly growing.
That's good. And so I think we touched upon, in terms of buying your first home and getting into real estate, what would you say for those people that are interested in investing in properties? You know, what advice would you have for them? Again, what are some myths, or what are some stories that you see that people are doing?
I want to hear Sardar's perspective on
law
this,
perspective,
the juicy
yeah.
legal details.
On the investment side of it, I think people think it is a lot easier than it really is.
Yep.
I think it's sort of like real estate, where you come to a closing, someone's like, oh, I could have done that, and they become a real estate agent, and they think, okay, I'm going to start making like quick cash. The same thing with investment. I think people think, oh yeah, I can find a short sale here or there, or I'll find a depressed foreclosure house, flip it and make a ton of money. I think it's what I've seen from clients of mine that are successful investors. It takes a lot of time and effort. There's there's definitely money to be made, but you have to know what you're looking to do. Are you the type of investor that's looking to come in, make a purchase and flip and sell? Are you the type of investor that wants to make a purchase, hold your property and rent it out? And once at least if I found is once you understand what it is that you want to do, it becomes a lot easier to focus on the types of properties that you can find and work towards purchasing on the investment side of things. But what I will tell you is, the clients of mine that are investors that are successful, it is essentially a full-time job for them, or they have a team in place that allows them to be successful. Where someone might be working full-time, as an engineer someplace, and then they have a friend who is handling the day-to-day aspects of locating properties.
You've done some investing and flipping.
Yeah, I feel
What's
like
your perspective?
I feel like the locating of the property is the biggest obstacle, and a lot of people feel like I can go online, Zillow, Truly, I see a bunch of short sales, I'm just gonna approach one, buy it, fix it up, with my construction. I know a couple handymen, and then I'll sell it. And unfortunately, what happens is that they get stuck with the property, with a job that's half done, and then they have no one to buy it, and then they're too deep into the property for them to back out. So I feel like that's one of the biggest problems that a lot of new investors face.
Yeah, absolutely. I've not done any investing. I've watched TV shows. Does that qualify?
And I feel like a lot of people base it off of that, like
That's
Property Brothers and things like that.
Yeah.
But what I will say that I've learned from those is, especially Property Brothers, is you got to get in, fix it, get out.
Yeah.
You understand? Especially amateur investors, they put in labor of love. They put in a lot of time. That's not what flipping is all about. You've got to get in and maybe get out in 2-3 weeks. I've seen properties. In fact, property is sold 2 weeks ago, and now it's back in the market. And while you're showing it, there's still work going on.
Yeah.
You understand? But that's a smart investor. They've got the traction going on already. I have a horror story. I have a seller right now. Couple of older Bangladeshi gentlemen, 65 over. They bought a property, and for the last 3 years, they've been stuck with it. Every issue you can think of, they have. They've been working with a plumbing company that has a horrible record on Yelp. Yet that's the company they're working with, because they did not look at the reviews online. They perhaps didn't go by recommendations and so forth. It's been just one run around after another. I've been involved with them for the last 6, 8, 10 months, and the ball has moved a whole lot since I'm pushing and pressing buttons and so forth. So it's moved a lot, but we're still waiting for gas. We have a buyer. We're actually in contract, but we can't sell the house until gas comes there, right? And then the other, I think, other thing you got to remember is you get what you pay for, right? So you want to use high-end finishes. It's going to come back in the price or in the offers that you get. Yeah.
Definitely, and another issue that we face a lot that I usually argue about on Muscare is REOs and short sales. Just because they're titled those words doesn't mean that it's something worth investing in. It doesn't mean that you're going to get it below market value. A lot of times REOs, I've seen them go a little bit above market value or at market value. Then you might buy it, but then you can't resell it to anyone.
Right.
So that's a big problem.
The key to, somebody asked me the other day, how do I get started in flipping? Is it, do I target a low neighborhood, this and that? Flipping is not necessarily neighborhood based, it's property based. How much room do I have to play with in a specific property? And then the neighborhood that you pick will determine will be determined on the money that you have in your pocket, right?
And time.
So let's imagine you've got $1 million to play with, then certainly you can play with a property that would cost you less than $1 million buying and renovating. But if you only got $300,000 to play with, then that's the property you got to go with, where you got to buy it, you got to renovate it, and then still have some reserves left until the property gets sold. And it is, as Sardar said, it is a full-time job. You've got to have a dedicated team member. A lot of times, brothers or friends or cousins or whatever will go into it thinking, oh, we'll do this. But then if you don't have a dedicated partner who will be in charge of the day-to-day operations of supervision and so forth, there are going to be rifts that will arise. And then, there'll be bad blood, and it's just going to be a bad end to a relationship.
Just to piggyback on that, when you're flipping a house, yes, it's important to find the right property, but in my experience in seeing it as the attorney dealing with investors, the key is the construction phase. That's where your money is made or lost, and the issue as well. There's got to be someone there on the property, on the ground, that's managing the people that are doing the work, because if there's nobody there, time and money is wasted. And the clients that I've seen that are really good at this and are efficient, like you said, they're in and out very quickly. Not as quickly as 2 weeks, but I'll give you an example. If a house is purchased in February, it's very likely that the work is done and the house is back on the market in 3 months, and it's sold within a total of 5 months. So they've turned around the house in 3 to 5 months. And that's what you've got to go in thinking. You can't, and I think the other thing is you have to have those reserves, because sometimes you get stuck with the property. You don't want to be stuck in over your head, because if you're stuck in over your head, then obviously you will accept any offer that comes in through the door, and then you're not making any money at that point.
Right, yeah.
I guess people don't factor in holding costs, property taxes, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got to have reserves for the unforeseen. You think that it'll sell right away. It may not be the case. And the other mistake a lot of sellers make is that they overprice the property.
Definitely.
As realtors, we know that your best chance of selling the property and getting the most money are actually at underpricing the property. You underprice the property below market value. You're going to have a whole lot of buyers coming through the door. They're going to bump into each other, and then they're going to bid each other out. You're going to get more offers and better offers. As opposed to, let's price it here, we can always come down later. That actually ends up hurting you more. But that's the route most investors take. They start high, they try their luck out, and then they drop the price.
Okay.
I've actually seen property in the market 3 weeks after it was bought by an investor. 3 weeks. You've got to know that work was not done through permits, because permits take longer. You understand? So it's possible, but then
if you're buying from an investor, just know it's going to be as is.
That's
and
right.
Oftentimes permits were not pulled out.
That's
You
right.
know, so just keep that in mind also. Sometimes you can find. I mean, for the young buyers out there, you're going to sometimes get your best deals from investors who are selling. But just keep in mind, as I said, not all, I don't want to say corners are cut, but the corners that can be cut will most certainly cut.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, there's a lot of experience here in real estate and, investing. What I want to ask you guys is, just to share, a particular story or stories or, whatever you've seen in the industry that really stuck in your head. Or
That's pretty broad. I'll let you.
I've got to think about that one. Stories.
Anything specific that?
Yeah.
I say, anything that challenged you and then you were able to overcome by implementing a new strategy or anything that you tried, because maybe early on in your career when you were first starting that you tried that really worked and that you saw that this was how you were going to conduct business going forward.
I think from the very beginning, that's something that's really, really important for me is just the communication and customer service. I think that's something that we've always just tried to, stick to. That sort of the strategy that's always worked for us. But as far as stories go, I don't think there's every deal has its own nuance or challenge. But I think what's really nice is when you have someone who's buying a home for the first time and there are a number of obstacles to get through, either it's because of the mortgage or there's issues with the home, and you get to the table and there's a family there and they're closing and they're just generally happy and you walk away. It's usually a happy time. And that's what I think I enjoy about real estate. When we close,
You get to see the happy ending.
We get to see the happy ending, right?
Right.
But every deal has its nuance. It has its challenges. you know, there's just too many to go back and just say there's one that sticks out. You know, I can't again specify, but I think the important thing is communications. You know, the strategy I think has been the most important thing. I think that's been really one of the reasons why we've been so successful in the short time that we've been, you know, 4 years now. You know, growing quite a bit. I think because we communicate. You know, we try to be as communicative as possible.
Communication is number one. Real estate is complicated as it is. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that are moving at the same time. And if the lawyer's not responding to calls and emails for a week, or if the appraiser or the mortgage company is not responding to emails or calls for a week, it just exacerbates everything else even more. So communication is key. I've worked with Sardar in 2018 on a number of files. I work with multiple attorneys, and I'm really happy with the communication that I get from his office, Humaira and Tara and and the rest. So, you know, when you have found the team that you can gel with and that you can work with, that's when work happens, right? So that's really important that's why I go back to, you know, my earlier saying that you've got to ask for recommendations. And then take those recommendations seriously. When your realtor gives you a recommendation, hey, work with this attorney or work with this inspector, they're doing it for a reason. Right? Because we know the quality of the work that they're going to provide. So I know Sardar's office has been instrumental in getting my deals to closing because they're constantly on top of their communication. So that is the number one thing. If you were to boil this whole thing down, it would be communication. You've got to find people who are communicating with each other, starting from the realtor, your attorney, and so forth.
There's definitely so many people involved. There's the realtor, the home inspector, the appraiser, the attorneys, the loan officer, and I feel like a lot of buyers fail to realize that it's not a two-man job or a one-man job.
No.
Actually, we're thinking about these stories, and one that really stuck out in my mind was actually a deal I had about 2 years ago that closed, and it was a family friend of ours, and it was a communication issue. Like here, I was trying to close a deal where they were selling and buying a house, trying to communicate with 4 other parties and not getting any responses back, and it gets very frustrating. You know, so that communication again is the key. And then in that deal, I remember literally having to do the job of almost every person at the table and finally willing it to the closing table because there was just a lack of communication. No one would respond back and say, hey, here's where we are, and you're just playing a guessing game. And that's, you know, that's something that just sticks out as you're talking about a challenging deal.
Yeah. Every deal is challenging to some extent, some more than others.
Well,
are we getting questions from users as well, from our viewers? What are some of those questions?
Not that many questions as of now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can definitely share the video, you know, let people ask questions, and we'll be able to answer at a later time. But for now, I think, you know, just closing remarks. Where do you see the industry is going? You know, just some advice for, you know, realtors that are trying to get into the industry and just in general.
All right, so what I'm seeing now a lot is that now that the spring is coming, I see a lot of more houses are coming on the market, a lot more buyers are coming on the market. Definitely more options to choose from. You know, hopefully we have seen prices of houses go up. Hopefully they come back down to what they should be, and that's about it.
How do you guys see inventory right now? Because you know, this past year we know it's really a seller's market. There wasn't a lot of inventory.
Past year was terrible.
You know, pricing was really tough on buyers. So how do you guys see that shifting now? Because you guys see it more so than we do on the legal side, and that's an important, you know, I think for our viewers to take.
Inventory is still very tight. It is still a seller's market, although things are improving. As interest rates go up, inventory will increase as well, because fewer buyers will be able to afford. So the way the interest rate works is that those buyers who are on the edge of affordability are no longer able to afford. So let's imagine we had 100 buyers in the market and 10 were on the edge. They could just barely afford, but because interest rate went up, they could no longer afford. So now we have 90 buyers. So less buyers, but let's imagine the inventory is still the same, right? So there's less demand on that inventory, so prices would come down. So supply and demand equals price. So that's on that front. However, a lot of sellers, as I told you earlier, you buy a house today, what you can afford, later on you upgrade. What happens is a lot of those early buyers bought a house and they're sitting on 2%, 3% interest rate. They would like to upgrade to a better house, but they know that if they upgrade, they would be looking at 4, 5, or 6%, and therefore they're shying away from selling their house, and that further affects the inventory because no inventory is coming in the market. Nobody's selling to go to some another house. So it's very intertwined. But you know what? These are market forces that will always be there. You've got to focus on the now and the today. And what that means is you've got to buy what you can afford today. Don't worry about what's going to happen. You know, if Columbus had thought 20,000 questions, we wouldn't be sitting here. Not that I'm a fan of Columbus, but the point is you've got to do some due diligence, you've got to say your prayers, and then you've got to take the first step. So as first-time home buyers, you've really got to have some faith and really jump in. And you know, you've got to work with a realtor that's a little pushy, actually. You know, because you're going to be as a first-time home buyer, you're very shaky, you're very scared. There's so many uncertainties. There's so much going on. So you've got to have a partner with you that's going to push you into making this decision.
Well, speaking on that, we did you know, get a question from one of the viewers, Richard, who was saying if she wants to sell her home, where should she start?
She should call me. I'm just kidding.
I think now she should call Hamza.
There you go. Well, I was gonna give her Hamza's number when she calls me. But yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I think the first step would be for a seller, just like, you know, other sellers would do it, call your friends and family, ask if someone's recently sold a house, listen to their recommendations, call that agent over, let them view the house, have them run a cumulative analysis, try to get the worth of your property, and do your research as well. And then that way, you know, you can sit down with the realtor. Then you would get into the negotiation of their commission. Then you would negotiate that, and then that's when, you know, they would hire a photographer to put your house on the market. It's a fairly simple process if you listen and you trust your realtor.
That's absolutely, and that's the key word, your realtor. A lot of homeowners, and you know, I can understand why, but they try and sell the house themselves, right? It's understandable. Why would I want to pay 3-4% of $400,000 or $500,000 to somebody when I can simply just put it on Zillow, show it to a few buyers over a weekend, and then let the lawyer do his job for $2,000, and we'd be done with it, right? So that's the human nature. But guess what? Data shows that houses that are sold through a realtor sell for 18% more than when they're sold by an owner. So a realtor is actually going to bring you more money. Plus, there's so many legal challenges that they need to be aware of, and a realtor is really equipped with that kind of knowledge to circumvent the system and also make sure that no laws are broken and so forth. So it's important to work with a real estate agent.
Okay. I think another question we got from Kevin is how do you deal with capital gain tax when you sell your home?
That's a question for your accountant.
So
actually, and again, this is just generally speaking, and if you, again, I would actually seriously speak to your accountant about that. But generally speaking, there is if you're married, you have an exemption up to $250,000 if it's your primary residence, and if you're married, that exemption is $500,000. That means you only will experience a capital gain tax if you realize a profit in excess of $500,000. If you're married, if the property is not your primary, if you're not selling your primary residence. If you're an investor, and I think Hamza can speak to this, a lot of times what happens is investors will use what's called a 1031 exchange, which doesn't necessarily eliminate your capital gains tax, but allows you to defer the payment of the capital gains tax, so you can remain liquid while you're moving from one property to the next. So there definitely are strategies that exist to minimize the 1031 impact, but generally speaking, there's an exemption up to $250,000 from the individual if you're selling your primary residence, and there's this, under the tax law, there's a specific rule for that. I think it's if you used it for at least 2 or 3 of the preceding 5 within the past 5 years, if in that time frame for at least 2 or 3 years it's been your primary residence, you don't have to pay a capital gain up until $250,000. And again, if you're married, it's a $500,000 exemption there.
So the moral of the story is get married.
I'm sorry. Another question we got is there a standard percentage of commission that all realtors take?
No, it's even if you look on the Department of State's website, it's negotiable. A lot of realtors, you know, they'll charge anywhere on average from 4 to 6%. But people have to keep in mind that 6% does not go directly to your realtor. He's not going to become a millionaire just by selling your house. From that 6%, for example, he's going to be paying a certain percentage to the agent that brings the buyer. So that's one less thing you don't have to worry about. He'll split his commission with that person. And then you have to keep in mind that the realtor is not even going to keep that percentage that he kept for himself. That is going to be divided with his broker. So not that entire 6% is going to go directly into his bank account.
I'm assuming there's also marketing costs as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are there any? Is there anything? Sorry,
No,
maybe
no,
ask a
no,
question
go
to these guys, but like, so there was a question one of the viewers asked about for if they're selling their home. As a realtor, is there anything that you'd advise a seller to look for in a realtor? Like, you know, that you think, okay, this is what sets a good realtor apart from one that's not when you're looking to sell your home, like, you know, someone that's staging the home. What should you expect from your realtor?
I would recommend like a realtor that will give you tips on how to get the most money. A lot of realtors just want to get the listing so fast that they'll tell you, hey, listen, this is the documents, sign them, let's put your house on the market. I think a good realtor is one that would walk into your house and tell you that, listen, you know, maybe if you change the paint of the room or your doors are broken, maybe if you change those, update your windows, and, you know, it can add this much to your profit in selling the house. I think that's the type of realtor you should get, someone who's willing to give you tips on how to increase the value of your house.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to work with a realtor that's going to give you directions on what's going to be beneficial and get the property sold. You want to work with a realtor that has a track record, right? It doesn't necessarily mean somebody who has more sales, but, you know, in a certain time frame. Somebody who's been working for 6 months, but they've sold 2 houses actually has a better track record than somebody who's been working for 5 years and has sold 5 houses, right? So, you know, how active is this real estate agent? You know, are they going to get the job done? And of course, rely on reviews, rely on recommendations.
Great. So I think the last question we have is there a time of year that's best to sell?
I think the summertime is the best. I feel like that's when most buyers are out looking for houses, and I think personally people like to go out and see houses in nicer weather.
Yeah, I mean, each season has its pros and cons. You have a lot more buyers out in spring because they want to close by summer and then get their kids to new schools by September. So the advantage of the spring market is you have a lot more buyers. The disadvantage is you also have a lot of other sellers who also have houses in the market. So you've got a lot of inventory competing with you, right? So if you put your house in the market in fall, you're probably competing against a lot less properties. I think the key is to price it better. Right, price it aggressively, price it under market. Work with a savvy real estate agent that's going to have marketing in place and so forth. I think the house can sell in any season if it's done right. Yeah.
All right, great. I think this was a great discussion. Thank you for you guys to agree to be the panelists for this webinar. I want to thank everybody for viewing. And we're going to continue this with the Muslim Entrepreneurship Association group and hopefully build up our community. So,
sure. Phone numbers?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Plug yourself.
Yeah, go ahead. Plug
Hello,
away.
this is Sardar Asadullah, guys. Our phone number is 516-274-0764. As I mentioned, we are a full-service real estate law firm. Whether you're buying or selling, give us a call. We're happy to help and answer any questions.
Cool.
And I'm not charging $2,000. I actually want to meet the attorneys. They should know instead of charging $2,000. I want to become friends with them.
That's right.
Well, yeah, you guys can reach me at 917-822-0433. You can text or call me. You can reach me on my Facebook or Instagram, Hamza the Realtor. You can always message me on those platforms as well.
Makes me laugh. Mine's 914-215-1540 for all your halal mortgage needs.
Tell them about your Instagram.
Oh yeah, it's your halal mortgage guy on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
He's got a YouTube channel too.
That's right.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys.
Cool.
Thank you
so much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining.